We already have more than 100 people already in the meeting room, so I think we should probably start now. So hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on wherever you're logging in from. Welcome to this webinar, From the Ground Up, Indigenous Nationally Determined Contributions for Climate Justice in the Amazon Basin. And thank you very much for joining us. My name is Thin, and I'm a journalist specializing in food systems and climate change, and I'm delighted to be moderating today's session. Now, first, before we begin, let me just go through some housekeeping rules. This webinar is in English, but we have simultaneous translation in Spanish, French, and Portuguese. So to access the translations, you just need to go to the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom window, you click on it, and then select the language that you want. And to help with our interpreters, I'd like to request our speakers to speak slowly and clearly. Now, this webinar is going to last 90 minutes, and we have set aside a fair bit of time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. However, we urge you to use the chat box to let us know who you are, which organization you belong to, and where you are joining us from. We're also recording today's session, and we will be sharing the link later with all of you. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's turn to today's topic. And it is that time of the year again when we start talking about the annual climate negotiations and what they mean for land and tenure security for Indigenous and local communities. But this year, the discussion is a little bit different. And it's not just because this year's COP, which is the COP30, is being held in Brazil, where there is a vibrant community of Indigenous organizations who've been at the forefront of these issues. And that statement is true for most of Latin America and the Caribbean. There has been a very, very strong civil society that has also been working with governments to bring these issues of Indigenous communities and local communities to light. But today we're here because most recently, during the 21st Free Land Camp, the Articulation of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil, APIB, launched a historic initiative that's an Indigenous Nationally Determined Contribution. Now, we've all heard of NDCs, Nationally Determined Contributions. These are blueprints that countries have drawn up to outline how they plan to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. But the Indigenous NDC is the first of its kind because it's rooted in ancestral knowledge. And it's all about reinforcing the point that the climate debate needs to consider equity, self-determination, and the effective participation of Indigenous peoples when it comes to the implementation of Brazil and Colombia's NDCs under the Paris Agreement. So how did this initiative come about? What has happened since? And how are Indigenous organizations building on this momentum? And what would we like to see at this year's COP? So we had actually arranged a fantastic lineup of speakers to talk about it. But as you all know, a lot of the Indigenous leaders and Indigenous organizations have been traveling, working in really, really hard to reach places and difficult areas. And some of them are having major telecommunications problems. However, we do have two great speakers who are joining us, and I'm going to introduce them in alphabetical order, just in order of fairness. We have Luz Helena Hernandez, who is the Director of Climate Change and Risk Management Directorate at Colombia's Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. Luz has decades of experience in environmental management, including climate adaptation. And it's great to be having a government representative joining us when we're talking about Indigenous NDC. So Luz, thank you so much for taking the time. We also have Patricia Suarez, who is the advisor for National Organization of Indigenous Peoples of the Colombian Amazon. Patricia, I think you are in a great place to talk about the Colombia's Indigenous NDC. Would you just be able to explain to us how this came about, what the focus areas are and what is involved in setting up this Colombia's Indigenous NDC?
All right. Good morning. I would like to thank you for inviting me to this session, to this panel. Greetings from Colombian Amazon to all of you, and from here, where we are with 64 indigenous peoples here. And we are working together in Colombia. And this is not only about climate, it's something about life, the livelihoods of our communities, our districts, our territories. So I would like to also take advantage of this moment to tell you that the Colombian Amazon has 27 million hectares, and there are many indigenous peoples there. And it is very important that, to keep all these territories, and they are kept because of the indigenous communities that live there, and, how we practice our knowledge, and how we contribute to the environment. So for us, it is very important that the world starts to look at the Amazon region with different eyes, through a different lens. And we believe that these initiatives are an important opportunity to see the changes that we are trying to make and what we are trying to do. And that is why we wanted to be present here today to share with you, what we are doing. This is a work that we are doing with Colombia, with Brazil, with different other groups. We have different strategic lines together with the Colombian government. Also, we have different strategies together as the Amazon Basin. And it has to do with protecting the indigenous peoples and the indigenous territories. So these are effective measures, really, to keep, our land, and it has to do also with energy transition. And we have to have, prior and knowledge of what is going to change, how things are going to change. We have to have, a voice that has to be heard when we talk about energy transition and all these topics that are nowadays people are discussing. So we want our territories to be part of these strategies. And we have another strategy that has to do with financing what we do. And we are really trying to build on those strategies so that we can be at the same level of other institutions. And I am referring specifically to the Colombian Amazon region. And we really want to have all those resources so that they can be distributed to the indigenous communities there, so we can plan better. And we have another strategy that has to do with indigenous knowledge and ancestral knowledge, that should also be included, in documents, in society, in general knowledge. So, we can in that way also help fight climate change. And in Colombia, especially in the Colombian Amazon, we have been developing or advancing in the dialogue with the government, so that government recognizes the importance of the territorial communities and the indigenous peoples and their place in society. So we also need to have that voice, that space, that seat at the table, let's put it that way. It has to do with governance, with climate justice. And we also work with another strategy that has to do with participation in different decision-making processes. Sometimes other people speak on our behalf, but we have a voice. We can speak on our own behalf. We are ready. We are prepared to raise our voice, and we ourselves can say what we need and how we want to help. Because sometimes I think we are not really understood when somebody else speaks for us. So thank you very much. This is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. I see Luz nodding her head, so I want to go to her next. But can I have a follow-up question, Patricia? If you could, I think you've explained very well, why it's very important for Indigenous communities to have a voice and for them to represent themselves. But it would also be great if you can explain a bit more about the Indigenous NDC process itself in Colombia, how it came about and where it is now. And you talked about the fact that you're also working with the government. So maybe you can explain a little bit on that as well. Thank you.
Yes, it is important to mention that we, the indigenous peoples of the Colombian Amazon, we are getting, special training by ourselves and also at universities. So we have all that training, all that political knowledge, or different levels of knowledge to be able to speak at those higher levels. And we have what we call an intercultural dialogue that we have been practicing and doing in Colombia. And this has to do with your question, how we are, working with the Colombian government. The Colombian Amazon has gained somehow a space and where we can talk about the policies that are being developed for our region. So we can talk to them about the following actions, the next actions. And we had a meeting with the Ministry of the Environment, and we submitted our proposals with them. It was a very well-written document, a very technical, political, full of information, well-written document, so that the ministry would, read the document, understand the changes that we want to implement, and they, the Ministry of the Environment, committed themselves to read that document and to work alongside us, to make those changes. And this is something that we're doing with the knowledge that we are getting from universities, from other actors. And I think we participated also in some other meetings with the government of Colombia regarding the protection of our territories. And this is a priority for protecting the climate, to protecting our environment. And the government understands better this now. And they acknowledge that the indigenous communities are key actors at this moment in the world, at this moment in history, to protect our environment. However, we are a little bit worried, and I have to say it, that it's good to say it here. We have until the month of September to update our CDNs, and we still have some work to do so that we can contribute better with better documents, with more documents, with more policies or proposals. So many policies that we suggested and proposals that we submitted have been accepted, but others have to be changed, have to be improved, have to be amended. And well, we have until September to do that. So yeah, we are, pressed for time a little bit. So yeah, we see that the Colombian government is committed to the indigenous peoples. However, there is a political moment in Colombia right now that is not easy for the government either. It's like things are not completely clear, like we're not 100% sure that all our proposals are going to be added to the government policies, but we want to keep pushing. We want to keep trying to say that we are here and that we are ready to help the government, that we have the knowledge, that we have the training. And it is important that the Colombian government, acknowledges that we are really key actors to protect the environment. And it is also important that protecting our territories, in Colombia, we don't want to say that some territories are that some communities are voluntarily isolated. You know, we don't want to be isolated. We want to be protected, but not isolated. Because we want to protect biodiversity in Colombia. We want to protect life. And that is why we want to make sure that our proposals or the policy changes that we send to the government are really seriously considered. And we are committed to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, Patricia. I'm late. I want to go to Luz now, but later on, I might want to come back to you. And because you talked about the different focus areas, 6 or 7 areas in your proposal. I might want to ask you about that. But Luz, can I come to you next? Because Patricia talked about the fact that the indigenous organizations have been talking to the government, but that's not always the case, right? That the government.
Sorry, the interpreter, this is the interpreter speaking. There is some connection issues. Luz and the interpreter are not listening.
Oh, can you hear me? Can others hear me? Okay. Can the interpreter and okay, and Luz hear me as well? Can you now interpret again? Just so that
Yes, can you ask, this is the interpreter talking, sorry, can you say the last part again? Thank you.
Sure. No, I was just saying that, it's not always the case that civil society organizations, especially indigenous organizations and the government have, this kind of open communications and sort of almost like a partnership. So I'd like to hear from Luz her reflections on what Patricia has said, and also, the whole idea of indigenous NDCs in itself, and what does it mean for Colombia? Luz, you're on mute.
Luz, my apologies. Here I am. All right. First of all, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak here. This is a great opportunity to have this dialogue. I am part of the government of Colombia. I am the director of climate change of the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. My minister, Leila Estrada, is the first indigenous minister in Colombia. And this is quite an important blueprint for our country. The first indigenous minister. And this allows us to improve that relationship and, this more respectful relationship between the government and the indigenous peoples. And the indigenous peoples, they really had to fight their way into, this space. They really had to fight to be recognized, to be acknowledged as actors. And we are at that moment in which that is really important. We have to keep on moving forward. Okay, now we have, the government has acknowledged that they are important, but that is not enough. We have to keep on going. That is why we keep on having these dialogues, not only with the regional group of the Amazon, but also with other groups that are important in this region. Colombia has around 115 indigenous communities all around the country, and they belong to different organizations, let's put it that way. 7 of those organizations are part of what we call the Permanent Roundtable of Communication, let's put it that way. OPIAC is one of them. And within that roundtable, let's say, we have had many different conversations to update the NCDs. And, this is a term that sometimes people don't understand, by the general population. So we call them our climate challenges. So instead of calling them NCDs or NDCs, we call them our climate challenges, so that everybody understands. And we talk about, I don't know, greenhouse gases and, all of these things, how we can be more resilient towards climate change. and disease, yes. So we are really trying to have the participation of these organizations. OPIAC, as Patricia said, has been working very diligently, bringing very clear proposals. And we, as government, agree with those proposals. And we really trust that they will be included into our NDCs or, climate challenges, as we call them. Because of the structure of the permanent roundtable that includes all the indigenous peoples, there's a protocol, there are, discussions and talks that have to be followed, or steps that have to be followed. And we are in that process of following those steps. And MPC sent us a plan that that requires a certain financing, and we are trying, to get that financing, to get the contracts going, and then, to keep the process going, so that the people can go from their territories to Bogota to participate in these roundtables, so that all the organizations can come to an agreement and finally add these policies to the laws. This will happen in August, these roundtables, these dialogues. And there will be 3 different dialogue spaces, let's put it like this, and they will take several days in August. And we will have these discussions between the different indigenous organizations and the government, so we come to an agreement regarding the proposals and the policies. Apart from that, we have been working with what we call the National Development Plan in Colombia, the Power of Life, we call it. What we want to do is to have another plan, what we call mitigation and resilience for the environment, and that is based on the knowledge of the indigenous peoples. This plan has been already discussed. The indigenous communities have discussed this plan, and there were different proposals, contributions. We are now in the stages of, keeping, following the next steps to really make it a concrete factor that will be added to the NDCs. We have also what we call NPCs 2.0, and it was not complete. We didn't have the point of view of the indigenous communities, the Black people, the people from the countryside. So some things were not included for these people. So as Patricia said, they sometimes important things are not included in the main document, but are included as an annex or an appendix. But what we want to do now is put everything in the content in the real document, not as an appendix or just as an annex. We want to make sure that everything is included, with including the Afro-descendant communities, the indigenous communities, so that everybody participates. And we want to organize also different workshops in different regions of the country, so that everybody is familiar. And this is more or less the plan. And I want to say it again publicly, we are committed, and the government is committed, to add the vision of the indigenous peoples in the NDCs. Or climate challenges. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Luz. And it's great to hear.
Thank you.
How open and candid you are in talking about that commitment. And I think it's really important point you make also about the language, right? Calling it climate challenges versus just calling it an NDC, because I think communications is so important to make sure that, you know, NDC in some way is it's jargony, technical term that is like part of this complicated UN process. But if we say climate challenges, I think people understand it very well. Just a very quick follow-up question, Luz. You talked about this permanent roundtable, right? With Indigenous organizations. Is that a recent development? Is that something that has happened only recently, or has it, you know, has that communications and discussions and that mutual respect, has that been there, you know, for a while now?
So this permanent roundtable exists for quite a long time. The new part in this debate are exactly these commitments, this challenge, these climate commitments. So it is the indigenous peoples that are participating in the decision making in the territories. As Patricia has said, the territory is used for climate action. The new part is the debate. So the topics that are discussed. So I believe we are progressing in this relationship, in this common relationship. The new part is how this vision is going to be incorporated in this session 3.0 that didn't exist in the version 2.0.
Great, thank you for that. Patricia, very quickly, can I ask you, because in the beginning, you talked about the fact that there were, you know, 6 or 7 focus areas that you're looking at specifically for this proposal. I was wondering whether you might be able to, you know, explain a bit more on what those focus areas might be.
Sure. So we as indigenous peoples from the Colombian Amazon, we use the different spaces that we have internally. So we sent a proposal to the Colombian government with 6 strategic lines. The first one is to protect the territory as a climate action. That's when we talk about the indigenous peoples' work to mitigate climate change. As I said, in the territories where indigenous peoples are based and are taking care of these spaces, we are in charge of these territories, and we can continue taking care of them, managing the nature, which is quite well conserved in these areas. And this is all aligned with the proposal for indicators and recommendations for the planning and adapting. And these are going to be issues that will be talked during COP30. Then the next strategic line is about just transition, about energy. So these are things that indigenous peoples have achieved in order to have our rights recognized. We know that the most important part of the respect is previous consent. So we cannot have any kind of just transition without the previous consent from the indigenous peoples. So if we don't give this consent, we will be the people that will be suffering the most. The third strategy is about climate finance, direct climate finance to indigenous peoples. We are protecting the nature, of course, but this is not easy. So we need finance mechanisms and we need access to them so we can start working with these resources. We've been working in the Amazon Basin, and I've also visited the Colombian Amazon, and in these places there had been floods. People have lost everything that they had. How are we going to overcome these challenges if we don't have any kind of resources of finance mechanism? The fourth strategy is about the ancestral knowledge and ancestral culture. So these should be pillars of the climate action. We know how to overcome all this, but this requires a process, a learning process. We've learned all these thanks to our ancestors, our grandfathers and grandmothers taught us how to deal with all this. And this is related to climate action and also to the next strategy, where we need the recognition of the governments as actors. So in Colombia, we need the territorial governments, the national governments to be involved. Sometimes we have governments in very diverse territories, but we need to also have the traditional governments, the traditional institutions to be part of this transition. So we are in a transition to become part of this national government. So, of course, we need a complete participation at a national level too, because we have people, of course, participating in this decision-making space in the government at a national level, and we are also there in order to serve as advisors, as consultants. We have our knowledge of the Amazon, and we know how to deal with the impacts of climate change.
Patricia, I'm so sorry to interrupt. If you could speak a little bit slowly, if you could be a little bit slower so the interpreters can catch up with you, that would be great. I'm so sorry to interrupt. But yeah, you can drink your water, maybe have a little bit of a breath, and then maybe speak again. But if you could do it a little bit slowly, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. Is that I feel emotional about this subject, and I think it's amazing. So we need a complete participation of indigenous peoples in these decision-making spaces. Why is this important? Because we were asked to participate there to tell the people how there are people and institutions that are contributing to the nature, but they are also dying. We're not participating as individuals. We are participating as representatives from our families, from our villages. And in this moment, the Amazon is suffering from floods. So this is having an impact in our lives. We are quite worried because we have seen the great heat that we've received, and our people not being able to access the chakras, and they are suffering these severe consequences of this climate change. So that's why it's a priority to get together, to be public, and to incorporate all this in the official documents, because we cannot go backwards. Everything that we do now will have an effect in the future. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Patricia, and I'm sorry for interrupting you. I see that there are already quite a few questions coming from the audience, so I just want to have one last question to each of you before we open the floor for Q&A. And this is the same question for both of you, although I guess the perspective is slightly different. So Patricia, what would you like to say to allies, in terms of how they can support you and your goals in the lead up to COP30? How can they help?
So we're at a very important moment in the Amazon, but also in the world. So we need respect and a real articulation. We need strategic allies, people that love the Amazon. Well, they can support in several ways, because the life of each of us is at risk. Because if we do nothing now, we don't know how we will be able to live in the future. So they can support in the several actions that we undertake as Indigenous peoples. They can help, but by being in the government, by supporting civil society. I know there are people that love and that contribute to the Amazon. So first of all, we support to defend our rights as Indigenous peoples, to defend our territories against climate change, and support also in order to have a complete and real active participation from Indigenous peoples. Because sometimes we're told that yes, we can participate, but in reality, we are not allowed. So they can help also by giving direct financial support to the people that really live in the Amazon and that are suffering the worst effects of climate change. We also consider it is important that our allies support us in the different actions and these priorities that we've been promoting as the Amazon Basin, and with several organizations from the Amazon Basin that are involved in these actions. And we hope they can be a bridge to facilitate the dialogue with the governments, so we can lead the process of sharing what we really want. Maybe they haven't understood our proposals, but we would like them to be the bridge so we can explain our proposals. And last but not least, there are many ways of supporting, but I think it is very important to give support in the media. So the social media are extremely important in order to share our messages of how the indigenous peoples are living the climate change and what proposals we are sharing in order to overcome these challenges. I would also like to say that the Amazon is in the point or not being able to, in the point of no return, but it is the responsibility of the whole society, if we love our life, to do something, to have good living conditions for the people that will come in the future. It is our present and it is our future. And the Amazon will always be open for people who would like to help from their hearts. We will be working here in the spaces that our grandparents left us. But we would like, of course, to have allies can support us in this process, because this depends on all of us.
Thank you, Patricia. Luz, it's a slightly, I guess, different for government, but the question is still quite similar. You know, how can allies support, you know, Colombia's efforts in trying to incorporate those thoughts, like, you know, needs in your climate challenges in the lead up to COP30? What can be done? What would you need?
Well, we would need the support of all these diverse allies and the implementation of this 3.0 strategy. We've need loads of support for this. We have international and national allies in the civil society who are giving their support to this new program, but we need to dedicate a huge effort to implement it. So we need quite a lot of support in order to implement it. We need resources in order to do so. And we are sure that these direct finance mechanisms will be much better used in a more efficient way if we receive all this support. And this concept and methodological support is also very important, because we have a long way to follow to implement this 3.0 model, and also this strategy at a long term that we have in the country towards 2050. So we still have a lot to do. So these allies can have, of course, this fundamental role at a national and an international level, but of course, always respecting the national sovereignty without attempting against our goals. Because, of course, we have these decarbonation goals, but this situation is quite complex, so we need to be careful with these goals. And we also need to do a very good selection of these partners, so they are not going against the autodetermination of the indigenous peoples and against our goals. In order to do so, it is also very important to respect the traditional authorities in the indigenous territories and all the achievements that they have done till now. This is a very important step, and this has helped in the decision making of the actions about climate and about the actions for the territories. And of course, this has to do with the recognition of the tradition and ancestral institutions.
Great, thank you so much. Let's go on to the next segment of today's event, which is the Q&A. And we already have quite a few questions. I'm essentially going to try and take like 2 or 3 questions at a time so that we can try and respond to as many as possible. And then I'm going to pass it on to the panelists for them to answer. And also, actually, before we go on to the Q&A, there is one small announcement. I think many of you probably already know that there are different organizations who have been trying to track the involvement of Indigenous peoples and other constituencies in these, decision makings around climate. And there's the Landex Global Land Governance Index, which now has climate indicators that's going to help members to track the involvement of Indigenous communities as well as land tenure and national commitments. So if you want to follow that, you can look at ILC's Landex Global Land Governance Index. Now let's move on to the questions. Patricia, I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, there are quite a few of the audience member who are asking for whether they can get access to the draft of the Indigenous NDCs in Colombia, so that especially for Indigenous communities in other parts of the world, they can learn from what you have done. So that's the first question. And the second question is there any news or updates on the Indigenous Circle that will work with the Brazilian presidency? I'm assuming that means Brazilian presidency for COP30, or maybe it's something else. Maybe Patricia, you know this. Luz, there is also a question for you, and it asks, how does the Ministry of Environment in Colombia propose to include the territorial approach to carry out climate actions in strategic ecosystems like the Amazon? So Patricia, I'll come to you first, and then Luz, I'll come to you for that. Patricia?
Thank you so much for the questions. I would like to say that we've done a summary of the complete document that we sent to the ministry. We will share the summary with you. We had a technical difficulty, but we will share the summary of this complete document in the chat. And about the updates, of the relationship with the indigenous peoples and the Brazilian government, well, we are part of this space as indigenous peoples in the Amazon Basin. So we've talked to the Brazilian government. We are quite happy about the invitation because we believe this is a space that can help promoting all the issues that we want to bring to this space about the Amazon Basin. We've had a space in Brazilian where we met and we made a declaration with proposals that are not very different to the ones that Colombia has. They are quite similar. So in the proposal, we talk about the defendants, and we understand that this space of the International Commission is the space also to prepare all the logistics towards Belén, because this can be a space that help us to position ourselves as indigenous peoples, because we are united, stronger than ever, so we can let everyone know who the peoples that are in the Amazon are. Because maybe this is the last opportunity that we may have as indigenous peoples in order to raise our voices and to let everyone know that in the Amazon Basin, we have more than 120 indigenous peoples, and that we are living in very difficult times, and that most of these peoples that exist right now will no longer exist due to the numerous threats that we are facing. So we need the International Commission and the several entities to help us with all this. Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So talking about territorial aspects, you know, this is quite important for the update NDC 3.0. We want to make sure we consider the livelihoods or the vulnerabilities and the risks of the people who live there in each one of those territories. And we want to make sure we understand their conditions, and if we understand the conditions better, we will be able to respond more accurately in all these aspects. You know, we have to mitigate impacts, and to get to know the territory better is really important. And working in the Amazon, we would like to tell you that we are, you know, on the path to COP30, and we are also working on what we call COP30 Amazon dialogues. And we are working with different organizations. You know, we are exchanging information, exchanging knowledge, and we will organize these, what we call, you know, Amazon dialogues. On a national level first, we will talk with different organizations that work in the environment area. Let's say that will take place on August the 2nd. Then we will have what we call an open dialogue with all the civil organizations of the Amazon Basin. I don't have the date in front of me right now, but it will be another meeting. And we want to really have this message ready for the president's meeting that will take place at the end of August in Bogota. Why in Bogota, you may ask? If Bogota is not so close to the Amazon basin. But, well, we say Bogota because the country, Colombia, and the world is receiving, let's say, the benefits and the impacts of what is going on in the Amazon basin. The water that we drink in Bogota depends on what is going on in the Amazon basin. So, every change that takes place in the Amazon basin affects the Andes, the mountain ranges, and of course affects a city as big as Bogota. So there will be a special presidential meeting in Bogota, and we want to bring the message there. And there we will show more, how important it is that all the presidents work together on these recommendations, suggestions that come from the civil society. And, that has to do, of course, with the COP30. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I now have, let's go on to 3 more questions. And I think, Patricia, maybe you would, this would be, all 3 questions would be relevant to you. Luz, I think at least 1, if not 2, would be relevant to you. And then I will just ask you both to respond afterwards. So the first question is, what's the integration like between social organizations and indigenous peoples of the Amazon from different countries? Is there joint action between these 2 groups, I guess working together, whether there are joint campaigns and stuff? And then secondly, what real possibilities do you see to influence in COP30 as indigenous communities or civil society when the COP discussions are becoming more a space for corporate capture of decision making? And number 3, if you follow feedback from various COP conservations, there's usually a split, or maybe the attendee meant to say there's usually a difference in terms of opinions when it comes to participation, because national governments will say that they consult or notify indigenous peoples, while indigenous representatives want to see a greater level of participation. So for each of the speakers, what does participation mean? So 3 questions, 3 possible answers. Again, Patricia, I'll come to you first, and then Luz, I'll come to you next for a response.
All right. Thank you for the questions. It's great to hear those questions. So we remember everything that we do. Sometimes we do so much and the time goes by and, we don't remember. Okay, regarding the first question, I'm going to talk about the indigenous peoples that I represent. From last year, from, let's say, mid-year last year, we have been working together with the 9 countries that are part of the Amazon Basin. And we had a meeting in Bogota last year. And we spoke about, priorities for COP30 and the climate change meeting also, or the climate change summit. So we got together there and we discussed, important aspects that are relevant, not only for Colombia, but for the whole of the 9 countries of the Amazon Basin. We have continued these meetings, this alliance, this way of working together with all the indigenous peoples of the Amazon Basin. And we, as indigenous peoples of the Amazon region, we really are trying to strengthen that connection, that contribution, that work hand in hand, let's put it that way. So we are together. And I can give you an example of how we are uniting, as indigenous peoples together with another actors. A PIG, they are organizing an action, a campaign, and we are helping different actors, also from civil society. We participate not only on territorial level, but on other levels, so we can add different, let's say, for example, recommendations of what to do in different regions of Brazil, and how we can help those recommendations. What can we contribute with our knowledge? What are the similarities or the differences between what is going on in Brazil and in Colombia, and we share knowledge. Now, regarding your second question, we have very important allies that have visited the territories, and they have understood firsthand who we are and how we want to continue living our lives. And I think that when other actors see what we are in our land, let's say, they understand better and they really want to help us more. So it is important that they participate, that they are there with us. And when we talk about participation, I don't mean, how many people from this organization and that organization will be present, physically present in Belém do Pará, where the COP30 will take place. For me, participation has to do with how many people, how many of the indigenous peoples can be present in different, let's say, spaces for debate. Maybe only one person will go to Belém do Pará to the actual meeting of the COP30, but that person will bring the voice of so many people from his or her, territory. So I think that is really participation, not the number of people, but the number of the amount of voices that that person brings to the table. So yeah, I think that this is for me participation, that we are all heard, although we are not there present in person. And also another way of really reflecting whether we are participating or not is whether how many of our suggestions or contributions are really included in the policies later on. And we take them as small victories. Going to Belém will be another small victory, and that has to do with participation. The decision-making process, that we are there, that decisions are made, that policies are, firm, that is participation. I'm not sure if I answered your questions, Thin.
Yes, you did. You did. Muchas gracias, Patricia. Luz, the floor is yours.
All right. Yes. I was thinking also of these Amazon dialogues, and it has to do with that, with trying to make sure that all social actors can communicate with each other, can have this open dialogue and share their different points of view, and to build something together, considering all points of view. So this is the objective of these interactions, of these Amazon dialogues. And when we talk about participation during the COP30, there are many ways of participating, but we, as the Ministry of the Government of Colombia, we wanted to add to include the participation of the Afro-descendant communities, the countrymen, and the Indigenous peoples. We wanted to make sure that they were there at the negotiations table. This was quite new, because to have these people sitting there at the table, it was not usual. It didn't happen in some other COPs, let's say. They were invited, but they were not able to negotiate. Let's put it that way. And this time we want them to negotiate, to participate with that power. But mentioned something like that at the beginning of this session. We had different meetings, and a person was appointed, let's say, as a negotiator or facilitator in this process of dialogues and meetings, planning for COP30. And so in our position documents, we really see the participation of all these people. So we, for COP30, want to have 7 negotiators. Why 7? Because we have 7 organizations that are part of the MPC and 2 that are part of another organization. So in total, it's going to be 9 negotiators that we want to have for a COP 30. We are including the Afro-descendant peoples. We want to make sure that they are also well represented. I think there will be also something like 8 or 9 negotiators for the Afro-descendant peoples. So they can really be present everywhere. You know that there are different rooms with different topics and different themes, and are on the right room at the right place. So we want to make sure that we have enough people, enough negotiators to go to all the rooms and to participate. So we opened what we call a negotiations school. And the ministry, our ministry, has the objective of strengthening people, giving people the tools that are necessary to negotiate, basically, to talk with these people, if you know what I mean. So we had an introductory session, and yeah, basically we're giving them, the tools and the training to negotiate. And I think that in a week or 2 weeks, we will officially start this, process of training these people, these delegates and these negotiators or facilitators. So we really hope that we participate in the negotiations, because as Patricia said, what is the use of saying, 20 people went there and in the end nothing changed? Just to say that there were 20 people and to write down on a document that 20 people were present, that is not enough. We want to make sure that something happens during the decision-making process. And, there are, other ways to participate, side events in the what they call the green zone, or here and there, other meetings. But everywhere where we see that there are important dialogues, we want to be present, and we want to train our people and the indigenous peoples and the Afro-descendant peoples to make sure that they have the tools to talk, to negotiate, and to make sure that their voices are heard in a clear way. And this is what we are doing towards COP 30. We are getting ready for that. I said we have the negotiators school that we opened. We are going to share some links with all of you, so people who are interested in organizing events, that they can learn also how to do that. And, to make sure that everybody knows that there is a way to participate and to be a part of all this. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you for your answers, and actually, to the attendee who asked that question as well, because that raised a lot of really interesting points. Now, before we go, I just want to ask both of you one very last short question. You can just give 1 or 2 answers. What is the one thing that you would like attendees today to take away from this discussion? When they think about Indigenous NDCs, when they think about COP30 and Indigenous community, what would you like them to take away from this discussion that we just had? Patricia, I'm going to come to you again, and then I'll give Luz the last word. Patricia, what would you like the attendees to take away?
All right. I would like people would like to remember everything, but I know that, everything is very important. But if I had to choose one thing so that people can remember from this conversation, is this: in the Amazon Basin in Colombia, we have indigenous peoples. They have their own governance, they have their own government, they have their own territories, their own systems, and they are protecting life in this planet. And you have to help us. Thank you. We are protecting you. Help us protect you as well. Thank you. Right, I agree with Patricia, says Luz. And I would like to add, on behalf of the government, that the Colombian government is committed to really and truly include the needs and the contributions of the indigenous peoples in climate change processes that we are taking at the moment. We are committed. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you, Luz and Patricia. Can we give them a virtual round of applause, please, for their insights and for taking time to speak to us? We know that it's really, challenging with all the communications problem and issues and difficulties. So we really appreciate them joining us to share their insights with us today. And thanks to you, the audience, as well, for your participation. As promised, we will also work with Patricia to so that they could share the summary of the Indigenous NDC with people who attended this webinar, so you can also learn from that. And of course, thanks also to our host, the Tenure Facility and the Land Portal Foundation. It's been a real pleasure for me to moderate this event. Have a great rest of the day and goodbye. Thank you so much again. Muchas gracias, Patricia and Luz.